On today's Hot Sheet, I've got a housing inventory update for the week, more of Jerome Powell's remarks on housing, and the latest employment report. Today is Monday, March 11th, 2024. I am Byron Lazine, and the Hot Sheet starts now. Good morning and welcome back from the weekend here on the Hot Sheet. Let me know which market you are tuning in live from here today. As we kick off every single week, we're going to jump into housing inventory. Is it improving? Are we going to get that shortage of homes onto the market here in this spring market that we ever so desire? And if we do, how quickly will it come? We're going to get to some of Jerome Powell's comments later. And Jerome Powell says not only is inventory a short run problem, but it is a problem that will be persistent in the long run. So what's going on here in just the last week? Inventory did go up when the same week last year inventory went down. So I do take that as a little bit of hope here in this real estate market. Now, I do believe just based on, looking at different markets that this inventory increase here nationally is being driven by certain markets in particular, okay? Kind of like the one I'm sitting in South Florida, Southwest Florida to be specific. We showed the chart, I think it was on Thursday here on the Hot Sheet, where Punta Gorda, which is about an hour and a half north of where I'm sitting right now, has 34% more inventory than pre-pandemic levels, while other parts of the country might be less inventory than the same time last year. So this inventory increase is being driven by some of these micro markets. You would know what's happening in your market best, but here's what's happening across the country. We did see an inventory increase of a couple of thousand, from 498,000 plus to 500,000 plus active listings on the market, active inventory on the market. Same week last year, we had a decline in active inventory from 419,000 plus to 413,000 plus. The inventory peak last year was just under 570,000. So we're 70,000 away from that number. Okay. Now we should see, especially seeing it here in this beginning of the spring market where inventory is increasing, that would give me hope. That should be a signal that inventory will increase throughout the year, finally bouncing off of this historically low inventory shortage. We should see more and more inventory come on. Certainly, if you can see inventory coming onto the market now and increasing week over week, you would imagine that when the spring buyers pass, the spring market passes, you would see inventory stack up even more. Rates will have a lot to do with that, of course, as rates, if they do come down significantly, could spur a boost in buyer demand. Okay, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But here we are, 2019, which I kind of look at as the last normal market. Same week in 2019, we had 816,000 for active inventory. So well over 300,000 on the active inventory in just 2019, which was a strong seller's market, if you remember, before the world changed in 2020. If we look all the way back to 2015, really 3 years out of the double bottom of GFC, you had 971,000 on active inventory. So we are nowhere near the 2015 to 2019 levels, but improving week over week. New listings, something that can drive this active inventory total, and something that buyers have been waiting for quite some time. New listings went up to 59,243. So we saw an increase here from last week at 52,000 to this week at 59,000. That would be tied for 2022 levels and well above last year's level, the same week, of 50,687. You can see here, if you're viewing on the charts, the dark maroon line is this year, and we are now lockstep with levels of 22. Every single week we've been above levels of 2023. We'll look to continue to improve on new listing data. 2011, which is an unfair comparison, but this is what we have in front of us here. Housing Wire comparing to 2011. Logan just wants to open everybody's eyes here, all the doom and gloomers out there. But 2011, 362,000 on new listings for the same week in 2011. So we're nowhere even in the ballpark, in the galaxy of a great financial crisis moment with in regards to how the inventory was operating during that time. Now, every year, as highlighted by HW, about 1/3 of homes have a price cut before they sell. That's typical. Okay. And so we're going to take a look at what that looks like throughout this year. And in the past week, we saw another increase in price decreases. That's up to 30.5% for last week. Same time last year was 30.6. So this time last year, we were on a decline week over week on price decreases. We've been ticking up here. A couple reasons why all of a sudden the last few weeks you're seeing price decreases go up, yet still below the typical 1/3 run. 1/3 would be 33%. We're at 30.5, but a trend that's moving up. You have rates that had been sitting over 7%. Thankfully, at the end of the week last week, they dipped back below down 7%. But you had rates that were elevated on the 30-year fixed in the previous 4 to 8 weeks, call it. And then you have inventory increasing. Anytime you have inventory increasing in a particular area, the sellers that really want to sell, that do end up selling. Remember, 1/3 of homes that sell, not ones that sit on the market and do nothing. 1/3 of homes that actually sell every year have one price cut at least before they sell, before they close. Okay. And so when you see inventory increasing and you do want to sell, how do you get more competitive? Somebody comes on new, they come on $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 less than your asking price. You want to be the first to sell. Your features and your amenities or your finishes are very comparable. Then what do you got? You've got price to move with there oftentimes, and that's what 1/3 of the time sellers do. In the last week, you had 30.5% of sellers make that decision to go ahead and decrease the price. Same week last year, again, 30.6. Same week in 22 was 16.7. Same week in 22, of course, rates were probably in the 4%. What are we in March? They might have even been under 4% in March of 2022. You know what? Let's just, now I'm curious. So let's just take a look. We'll go back here, Mortgage News Daily, and we'll take a look at March of 22 was about, it was over 4.46 on the daily for 30-year fix there in March of 22. So the rates, remember, started going up early in 22, but prices weren't, in the fours, prices were not being impacted. There was a very robust spring market throughout 2022, for those of you that remember that. All right. So there's your update on inventory. Let's take a look at some more of Jerome Powell's commentary. Remember, Thursday morning, we covered his Wednesday comments, but he had a whole nother testimony on Thursday. I just want to go through the hot sheet show notes here and pick out a few of the key comments that he made. It's not as lengthy as Wednesday's testimony, but there was plenty of examples when senators were bringing up housing in asking Jerome Powell questions about that. Of course, you get the most out of BAM and our show notes from every show on the hot sheet. Make sure you join BAMX. Use code HOT to get 10% off. Here's today's show notes, for example. We break down each and every single show and give you the tidbits that you need in a detailed report so that you can use it in your marketing. Okay, let's go to the first question, which was from Bob Menendez, Senator. His first question, and I thought Bob did a good job here breaking this down. I wish Jerome Powell's response was as thoughtful as Bob's question. In my view, sticky inflation we've been seeing the housing sector is principally due to the massive nationwide housing shortage. I think we can all agree that this housing shortage, which is a long-term issue, is one of the things, or the main thing, as Menendez says here, that is pushing up prices the most. If there were more options for the buyers available, particularly in the affordable or median price points, you wouldn't have seen the increases that we see on housing the last few years. The Fed's monetary policy goes on to say, attributes, or the report attributes the shortage to restrictive zoning, which I completely agree with. Restrictive zoning is one of the reasons we're not getting these houses. High interest rates and tighter underwriting by banks. I would also add that to the list that underfunding of key HUD programs. Okay, so here's something that I haven't heard a lot of people mention. The underfunding of key HUD programs that shore up and expand our supply of affordable housing. He wants to add to that list. It was not in the monetary policy, is what Mendez was pointing out. The housing supply shortage continues to grow. We're likely to see continued housing inflation. And housing's already becoming less and less affordable for low and middle income Americans. According to the National Low Income Housing Coalition 2023 Out of Reach report, a worker earning the minimum wage in Jersey would have to work 2 full-time jobs to afford a modest one-bedroom rental home at fair market rent. And so he asked Jerome, do you agree that increasingly unaffordable housing is a problem for the economy? His answer is short and to the point. We've got two things going on. One, long-term housing shortage. That's the number we keep talking about, anywhere from 2 to 5 million homes short. You've heard the number as high as 7 million homes short to meet supply. That's due to a lack of building in the last 10 to 15 years after the great financial crisis. And I would point towards some of these zoning restrictions that the Fed points to in their monetary report as being one of the catalysts for that lack of building, of course, and also just builders being stung coming out of the GFC. So that's one, the long-term. How the other is pandemic effects and the associated higher interest rates that the Fed has created, which are the things that will pass through. So the pandemic effects and the higher interest rates will pass. And when that passes through, rates are normalized, we'll still have the underlying housing shortage. And that's going to be causing upward pressure on housing prices. So for Jerome Powell in this Thursday testimony, he mentioned that at least 4 or 5 times. I see it here in front of me in the show notes, where he mentioned we're going to have the underlying housing shortage issue for quite some time ahead of us. That means for quite some time ahead of us, there's going to be upward pressure on housing prices. Okay, well, I think there's going to be some micro markets that are going to experience some small declines in prices as inventory shoots up and sellers have to get real with they can't just continue to create a record month over month over month. That there's going to be some cooling off on prices and maybe even some declines in some markets. I think overall nationally we'll see a modest price increase that's in line with most analysts this year. But overall, over the long term here, say the rest of this decade, Jerome Powell expects there to be upward pressure on prices. So as buyers, as investors try to figure out where's the market going, and if I wait, am I going to be able to capitalize on some huge decline in home prices? There's not many indicators that would be a safe bet. It'd be better off saying, okay, can I get the deal that suits my needs now and be a long-term holder of real estate? Over the long term, real estate, every single decade, you can set your watch to it, just continues to go up. And so Jerome Powell made that clear in this testimony on Thursday over and over again, that we have a long-run issue, a long-term issue on housing shortage that he has no tools to fix, that when the Fed's work is done getting inflation down to the target of 2%, is that problem is still going to exist, and it's going to create an upward pressure on housing prices in the future. So keeping that in mind as you educate your clients on what's going on with prices will be important. I want to play a clip, one question from Senator LaFonza Butler, and then Jerome's response here. We have a question from U.S. Senator, and we'll get the response.
Impact on lower income households who are focused on spending more of their monthly budgets on housing. How is the Fed's monetary policy impacting the supply of affordable rentals?
I don't know that we're affecting the supply of affordable housing. If you think of affordable housing as something that's connected to some sort of government program, that's not our bailiwick. I mean, clearly interest rates do affect the affordability of housing, though.
And there was a key point that you made in an earlier, I think, reference about, and in your response to Senator Smith about the monetary policy and the calculation of rents. Can you just spend just briefly talk about that? I want to have one last issue I want to get to before I run out of time.
It's hard to talk about it briefly. It's actually very conceptually challenging to think about housing inflation. Do you include the costs of financing it? Do you include the sale prices? And the answer is we don't. We convert ownership into an imputed rent, and that's 2/3 of homes are owned. And then we actually measure rents, but leases only turn over once a year. So you look at market rents, and what's happening with newly signed leases may be very different from what was happening a year ago. So it's complicated, but the good thing is we understand all that, and we look through that. We look at housing services overall as one of the three important categories, along with non-housing services and goods inflation.
Okay.
All right. So
yeah, I just thought it was interesting, that response from Powell talking about how complicated it is to factor housing inflation into this overall inflation number. Yet they continue the CPI, which is going to come out tomorrow. We're going to get CPI. I believe we're going to get CPI tomorrow. Maybe you can fact check me on that. Drop it into the comments. I believe we have CPI coming tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to covering that. But in CPI, you've got just owner's equivalent rent making up 26% weight. Obviously, overall shelter makes up like 36%, over a third of the CPI. And the owner's equivalent rent, he talks about all these complications. Okay, do we include sales prices? We don't. We really just look at rents, right? And all these different variables that Jerome Powell goes through to answer the senator's question. And yet the heaviest weight is owner's equivalent rent, which is a made-up survey. So it's like, if it's so complicated, why, when we get the data, is it so basic in a elementary, really misleading data way? Okay. So, he talks about the new rents being signed don't really reflect rent because, leases take a year to kind of run through. That's why I like looking at the real-time data as it relates to rent prices, or asking prices coming down, asking rents coming down, are new leases being signed now coming down. That's where you'd love the Fed to spend more time looking at, because that would give them, a better scope of when would be the appropriate time to start cutting. Now, the general thesis here in all of Jerome Powell's comments continues to be, we're not ready to cut. And there's a belief now that they may not cut until the summer. Okay. So there was, this May belief, I don't know if you include May in the summer. It's really after the end of May has passed, that summer kind of starts, right? Somewhere in the end of June there. And so there's a belief out there that it won't happen until that time. And we'll obviously see how the next couple of months progress and what the Fed is going to do. All right. So there's more question and answer in there from Thursday. There's a lengthy back and forth with Senator Cortez Masto and Jerome Powell on commercial. To summarize that, Jerome Powell says that the Fed has identified the banks. These are not big banks, but regional banks that have significant risk on their balance sheet. Risk meaning multifamily, not as much multifamily, obviously, as commercial office buildings. Okay. And they've been going through a lot of questions with them. Do you have enough liquidity? Do you have a plan? Are you going to be taking losses? So according to Jerome Powell, they've gotten ahead of this. They've identified the banks that are at risk. They're working with them. They're asking a lot of questions. They've been doing it for some time, according to Powell. And it's a problem that they'll be working on for years, Jerome Powell says. He says, I'm sure of that. We'll be working on this problem for years. So this office commercial sector, he did say there will be more bank failures. So the fact that he said that in this testimony, I would take that to the bank, literally, that, that, hey, there's going to be more bank failures. Why would he say that under oath if he didn't have pretty strong evidence to suggest that there will be more regional bank failures? And most of that is a catalyst from these balance sheets being, way out of whack with the reality of these commercial prices. So interesting comments there, and that's at the bottom of that segment there for the show notes. Okay, we did have on Friday some other employment data, which was interesting. Employment rose in February by 275,000 jobs, so the job market continues to be strong, while unemployment rate increased to the highest level in 4 months at 3.9%. Okay, so you're starting to see some signs that the job market is weakening, that employees, that workers do not have the leverage that they once had. While we do see non-farm payroll employment increase, that uptick for the highest level in 4 months on unemployment shows us signs that the market is getting a little bit weaker. Okay, that can be a catalyst for the Fed to maybe cut sooner. We'll see what happens. We'll see, obviously, what the jobs data continues to do. But here's the level, the highest level here on unemployment, really in line with the highest level we've seen in the last 2 years. Okay, so we haven't gotten up over 4. We'll see if that's where we're heading next. And I've got a comment here. I want to go through this comment. This was pretty interesting. And it relates to jobs. This is, got it on my other screen here. This is from Lawrence Yun, surprisingly, from chief economist from NAR. The short-term timing of purchase is dependent upon mortgage rates and inventory availability. Okay, so that's the short-term timing on purchases. So we've seen, essentially what he's talking about there is seen purchases drop to, really the bottom level, the floor of annual purchases, because of the inventory, because of probably more so rates than anything on that particular deal. Home sales recorded the lowest level in activity in 23 in nearly 30 years. So we had the lowest amount of transactions last year. Okay, here's the interesting stat he brings up. Note that there are 158 million payroll jobs today, added 275 in February, 158 million payroll jobs today. And I think a lot more people than that are working, because you think about how many people are now working through social and different ways, selling different things online, whatever the case may be. 158 million payroll jobs today. That's compared to the last time sales were this low, the lowest level in 30 years, last year. At that time, there was 117 million payroll jobs during that time frame. And I would argue that there was none of this side business going on like in the economy we have today. So significantly more employment right now than the last time sales were, transaction levels were this low. That implies a sizable potential real estate demand on the sidelines, ready to pounce once short-term conditions move favorably. Short-term conditions being the interest rate. So when that interest rate does decline, and this is a big thing for buyers to wrap their head around who are waiting for some huge cliff. I mean, if the 30-year mortgage rate drops before some cliff, which we don't know where that would come from with inventory, you're going to see prices then shoot up as this demand that's sitting on the sidelines is likely to surge at that moment. Okay. 10-year treasury yield in a much better position than we've seen for the last few weeks, down around 4.09. And if we just look at the last 5 days, it's a beautiful chart. It's on a steady decline there. And 30-year fixed ended the week last week at 6.85. 3 days in a row to finish the week under 7. We'll look for continued continued declines there, hopefully, on the 30-year fix. Start the week here. Stock markets appear down. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ just before 10 a.m. here on this Monday, all down a tick. I think Bitcoin is continuing to go up if anybody's holding the B, T, and the C. All right, that's the start of the week here for the hot sheet. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back here tomorrow, 9:30 on the east, 6:30 on the west. You know the deal. In between, until then, toodaloo.